Hello, everyone. I don't know if anybody out there has been hoping that I'd review this movie, but if you have, you're in luck, because today I'm going to share my thoughts on the latest film adaptation of Emma by Jane Austen. And you should know this review is going to contain some spoilers. This movie came out early in 2020. It had its theatrical release abbreviated by lockdown. It was directed by Autumn de Wilde and stars Anya Taylor-Joy as Miss Emma Woodhouse, the handsome, clever, and rich titular character who decides to try her hand at matchmaking, which she'll soon learn is a troublesome pastime. As far as the novel goes, some people love it, some people hate it. I fall into the love it camp. I've read the book 3 times, 4, 5, I lost track somewhere, and I've enjoyed 3 other adaptations. Randomly catching the 1996 Hollywood version on TV one day in my preteens, in fact, is what kicked off my love of period dramas, though it was not my first period drama and not even my first Jane Austen adaptation. But I think it was my first Austen adaptation besides Pride and Prejudice, and it made me realize I really like this genre. So I like Emma. That said, I wasn't exactly excited when I saw the trailer for this movie. The way it was marketed was so modern and cheeky and aggressively different that I was put off. I'm old school, and I'm not drawn to period dramas that are all about being fresh and bold and provocative reimaginings of the classics. I don't necessarily want to see the same thing done over and over and over again, but I don't like to see things stretched too far in the modern direction. That's a separate topic. That's one reason why I've waited to see it. Also, I knew people have strong opinions about this movie, and really any Jane Austen adaptation, and I wasn't in a rush to put my 2 cents out there. I knew that if I wasn't enthusiastic enough, the people who love the movie would be mad, and if I was too enthusiastic, the people who hate the movie would be mad. But I did want to see it eventually, and I considered doing an Emma book and adaptation review series building up to it, but it occurred to me that given the doubts I already had, it might not be fair to approach it with potentially superior adaptations fresh on my mind. I've been accused of doing that in the past. So I scratched that idea, though I still intend to review other versions sometime in the future, and went ahead and watched it. The last time I saw any adaptation was a few years ago. I haven't seen what I consider my favorite adaptation in even longer, and I haven't read the book since 2012. So that's where I stood going into it. And what did I think of the movie? I really liked it. It was funny and romantic and touching and mortifying in all the right places. I have few quibbles with it as an adaptation of the novel and as its own separate work of art, and while it does take some liberties with Austen's text, for the most part these elements added to the entertainment value without being so distracting that they diminish the quality of the narrative. Those are my general thoughts. Now for the specifics. Anya Taylor-Joy totally inhabits the character of Emma in her walk, her speech, her mannerisms. She captures the graceful movements of a high-born, well-bred Regency lady, but also the arch expressions and attitudes of a young woman who's been treated like a princess in her little village, and who believes she's the cleverest person in the room, because people have told her so all her life. I know Austen described Emma as a heroine that few people beside herself would like, and the film seems to want to hone in on that sentiment, as this Emma is quite conceited and snobby and borderline horrible for a good hour or so. But what I like about Emma is that, number 1, she's realistic with her deep-rooted character flaws. Number 2, I kind of hate this, but I do find aspects of her character relatable. And number 3, she learns from her mistakes. Humility is a very hard pill to swallow, but she comes to see the error of her ways and sets about changing them and becoming a better person. Emma Woodhouse should be a different young woman at the end of the film than she was at the start. And while there are moments when it might not seem possible we'll ever get there, that's eventually the case here. The film focuses, of course, on the various relationships in the novel. Emma and her former governess and companion, Miss Taylor, now Mrs. Weston, Emma and her hypochondriac father, Emma and certain newcomers to Highbury. It primarily centers around her friendships with foundling Harriet Smith, who Emma takes under her wing and misguidedly tries to set up with the local curate, Mr. Elton, and with Mr. George Knightley, the bachelor neighbor whose brother John married her sister Isabella. He's known Emma all her life, and is the only one willing to tell her off when she's spouting erroneous opinions. And boy, does Emma have it wrong sometimes. It's kind of embarrassing how poorly she reads some people, but that's part of her character development. And while she is an extremely flawed protagonist, and a bit of a mean girl, there were points where I felt like, too far, this is going too far. At the root of it all, she's a lonely person seeking a friend and companion. That doesn't excuse her bad behavior, but there are explanations for why she is the way she is. Mia Goth plays Harriet Smith, a character who, in the novel, is a dim-witted but sweet girl with a mysterious parentage that Emma glosses over, confident Harriet will turn out to be a gentleman's daughter and therefore her social equal. I liked this portrayal of Harriet. She wasn't anything special at first, but she grew on me, and she undergoes the most evident change, from the naive, exuberant juvenile to a young woman who makes her decisions for herself. She's capable of such tremendous feeling that she ends up getting her heart broken by Emma's meddling 3 times, and yet she forgives her every time. As for our hero, I know I did all those Pride and Prejudice reviews, so some people might assume that my favorite Austen hero is Mr. Darcy, but no, it's actually Mr. Knightley. Why? I don't know exactly. I've just always liked him. He's one of Austen's most communicative male characters, except when it comes to his own emotions, and I like that he and Emma know each other so well, and talk so much together. Each adaptation that comes along seems to dial the intensity of their arguments up a notch, and this one does an especially fine job showing the frustration the disagreements cause, though both of them are slow to realize why their lack of harmony bothers them so much. I don't, how do I say this? I'm not immediately attracted to Johnny Flynn's Mr. Knightley. It's not an instantaneous, yeah, he's hot. Sorry. However, his portrayal gives the character additional depth. He's warm without overstepping the boundaries of propriety. He's got understated charm. He's got a good sense of humor. And these are qualities that make the character appealing. And I appreciated the opportunities they took to show more of his side of things. Most of them. Let's take a minute to address the naked man in the room. Now I've got your attention. I know this is divisive. I heard about this before the movie came out, and after the movie came out, I heard both the outrage and the excuses. Here's my opinion. It isn't necessary. It's so quick. I was saying to my mom, I think this is where the brief partial nudity is gonna come. Oh, there it is. And it doesn't add anything. If the point was to show the elaborateness of the male costume and how servants dressed the wealthy, since we see Emma standing like a statue getting dressed too, I would have gotten the message just fine without being mooned. Instead, here's this awkward second-long shot and a nudity warning that's going to put off the more modest Jane Austen fans and make some parents think twice about showing this film to their kids. Was it that important to include it? By the way, parents, there are a few unbleeped F-bombs in the bloopers, just so you know. The other problem I have with the sequence, though, is that it doesn't fit with the character as I see him. Several comments are made about Mr. Knightley's independence and his unconventional way of doing things. He also criticizes Frank Churchill for caring too much about his appearance, and Mr. Elton, too, he criticizes for his vanity. So, I don't imagine Mr. Knightley spending this much time fussing over his clothes. That doesn't mean I want him to look sloppy and unpresentable. He is a gentleman, but he's also the kind of Regency man I'd expect to insist on dressing himself, rather than standing there while clothes are draped on him. I would at least expect him to tie his own cravat. So the whole sequence I could have done without, or I would change it completely. But it doesn't ruin the movie for me. It's super quick, it happens early on, and let's face it, the way they keep pushing the envelope to sex up period dramas in the 21st century, it could have been a lot worse. Side note, one of my first impressions was that Johnny Flynn was too young for the part, but if you look at the numbers, he was exactly the right age at the time of filming, so never mind. Something I did like a lot, which is a liberty the screenplay takes with the novel, is that the curtain is pulled back farther on Mr. Knightley's activities as well as his feelings and fears, contributing to the overall theme of the unnecessary trouble and heartache that arises when people fail to communicate their true emotions. And the heartache, as Austen showed time and again in her novels, was not just felt by the women. As for the other characters, when I saw that Bill Nighy was playing the father, and how he was playing the father, I was like, what? But he's delightful. I mean, he's bizarre and different from every other incarnation of Mr. Woodhouse, but delightfully so. A new interpretation of the finicky hypochondriac. And I like how, outside of the quirky and meme-worthy moments, there are also a couple tender scenes between father and daughter. I like that this version includes John and Isabella, though they did make her kind of crazy, and I always like him better in the book than I do on the screen. But the scene with the baby, the exploding baby, is hilarious. Each Mr. Elton is a little different, but I haven't seen one yet that didn't make me think, wow, this guy is perfectly cast. And that goes for Josh O'Connor's version, too. His Mr. Elton is such a creep, and so pretentious, and full of baloney. This version also gives Robert Martin some extra screen time. Not that he says much, but he's more present, showing up now and then with a pathetic, woebegone expression. And everyone else in the cast does a good job, distinguishing themselves to varying degrees. Rupert Graves and Gemma Whelan as Mr. and Mrs. Weston, Callum Turner as Frank Churchill, Tanya Reynolds as Mrs. Elton, Amber Anderson as Jane Fairfax, and Miranda Hart as Miss Bates. More on her in a minute. Also, here's a little casting Easter egg I picked up. If Mr. Knightley's housekeeper looks familiar, that may be because it's Lucy Briars, who played Mary Bennet in the '95 Pride and Prejudice. Taking it even further, they gave her the name Mrs. Reynolds, which is the name of Mr. Darcy's housekeeper. This was director Autumn de Wilde's first feature film. Prior to this, she was known for her photography and for making music videos. Emma is rich with its own peculiar style. There's nothing quite like it, and you get a hint of that from the distinct way the title is written, punctuated with a period like the names of novels used to be. There's a thorough attention to detail, and while I'm usually impressed with a well-made historical drama, there's evidence here of extra effort that I really appreciate. The many costumes designed by Alexandra Byrne are exquisite. The trim, the layers, the patterns, the colors, the little accessories, they're delicious. The hairstyles, especially Emma's perfect little ringlets and Mrs. Elton's over-the-top styling, are equally impressive, and the sets are beautiful to look at. The spacious rooms, the furniture, the architecture, the paint colors, the dim glow of candlelit dinners. There's a lot to digest, even without paying attention to the story, including little details like the wedge placed behind the carriage wheel to keep it from rolling back down the hill. And thanks to this movie, I learned about this game, the bullet pudding tradition, which I'd never heard of before. I'm not a historian, so there may be little inaccuracies that pass me by, but there's nothing slapdash or lazy about this production design. And the style of photography and editing allows you time to notice how fine everything is, rather than jumping from one bit to the next in a more modern fashion. In ways, it is a very contemporary film, which I think is why it's been most popular with the younger generation of period drama fans. It's got a quirkiness that is very today. Characters' behavior and reactions are relatable. The humor is executed in a modern way. The comedic timing, muffled outbursts between characters in the background, funny things going on with the servants, which you enjoy more with repeated viewings. None of that occurs in the book, of course, but it still feels like Austen. It's the kind of social absurdity that I think she would enjoy. It's just updated a little. Besides Emma's delusion that she's always in the right, there are two big evils that cause all the drama, and those are miscommunication and matchmaking. All of Austen's novels examine how things get messed up when we don't clearly communicate or we make the wrong assumptions about people, but Emma is the only one so concerned with what a disaster matchmaking can be, and it's a cautionary tale that doesn't get old because there are people still, to this day, who fancy themselves good matchmakers and try to set up their friends. I've been on both sides of the equation, willingly or not so willingly, and I knew better because I knew this story. And yeah, it's a bad thing. I've seen more awkwardness and unhappiness come from attempted matchmaking than happy relationships. And that's people who are going about it with the best of intentions. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Adding additional character to the film is the very noticeable music. The score, composed by David Schweitzer and Isabel Waller-Bridge, is whimsical in every possible way, and at times reminds me of the background music in a silent movie. The soundtrack is comprised of traditional and classical music. A few of the folk song renditions performed by Maddie Pryor and the Carnival Band reminded me of Peter, Paul, and Mary, but with an earthy, period-appropriate quality. What I find most satisfying is the fact that the diegetic music played within the film's setting and heard by the characters, is really being performed by the actors in the scene. I love these touches of authenticity when the actors are really playing and singing, and I found out afterward that Johnny Flynn and Amber Anderson started as musicians before they became interested in acting. So they're professionals. Flynn also wrote and performed the song Queen Bee that plays over the end credits, which was released as a single. We were watching the credits scroll by and I was like, you know, this singer's voice sounds kind of like Mr. Knightley's. And sure enough, it was him. I don't know if that was impressive or stupid of me. Another nice touch is the dancing, which is elegantly choreographed and filmed, though prowess on the dance floor varies according to character. Mrs. Elton's ostentatious moves are particularly amusing. Eleanor Catton wrote the screenplay, and she seems to be quite a newcomer to the film writing scene, as this is her first writing credit on IMDb. Let's take a minute to talk film-book comparisons, and keep in mind that I haven't read the book in a few years. A significant change I noticed was that Emma pays an encouraging visit to Robert Martin herself. That was kind of unusual. They also altered some details surrounding Harriet's father's identity reveal. Noticeable omissions include Frank being found at the Bates home and fixing Mrs. Bates's glasses, though this does show up in a deleted scene, Mr. Elton's contribution to Emma's Book of Riddles, and the anagram game. Because that's missing, Jane's leaving the Donwell party early seems more abrupt, so I would have liked that part to be a little more fleshed out. There's also a deleted scene with Emma, Frank, and Jane that I think could have been included just to tie up the loose end in a more satisfying way. All in all, though, these are fairly minimal changes that have no significant effect on the plot, except perhaps to muddle the mystery. The script doesn't mess around too much with Austen's dialogue either. However, there are a few things that have been snuck in between the lines, so to speak, like the tingly moment when Emma and Mr. Knightley are dancing and all of a sudden they become aware that they're attracted to each other and they're like, what's happening? And it's so intense that come dawn and the end of the party, Mr. Knightley runs all the way to Hartfield, I guess to propose, right then and there, like, my desire is too strong, we must be wed at once. And Emma's on board 100% until they're interrupted before either of them can say anything, and the plot picks up where they left it. And poor Mr. Knightley's face becomes the very picture of visible confusion. This was so unexpected and almost shocking, but not in a bad way because A, it was romantic and got your heart racing and all that, and B, it doesn't actually change anything in the story. It plays the scenario out a bit differently, but since no dialogue is actually added because of the alteration, there's no ripple effect on the rest of the narrative. Another let's veer off moment that really shouldn't work, but somehow does, is the random nosebleed. Here's this climactic moment, the main character is revealing their feelings and becoming emotional because this is a big deal for them, and here's the proposal we've all been waiting for, and the line, if I loved you less, I might be able to talk about it more, which is so beautifully frank and endearing. And then that. Now, I already knew about this from stuff I'd seen beforehand, but my mom did not, and I didn't spoil it for her, and her reaction was priceless. I'm gonna equate the nosebleed to the wet Darcy scene in Pride and Prejudice 1995. It's not in the book, and Austen never would have included it, but I don't know, it's not something that couldn't happen. It's not outside the realm of possibility. And again, it's weird and hilarious and so darn unexpected. But nobody actually says anything about it, so they don't mess with the dialogue. I'm sure there are people who watched that scene and were like, what is this? Is this supposed to be funny? It doesn't make any sense. It's stupid. And I get that. I like adaptations to be faithful, and I don't like modernizing touches, as I said, but I didn't find this offensive. It's just this awkward, unfortunate thing, and it's in keeping with the rest of the movie's tone, so I just rolled with it and laughed. And from my mom, too, it was a bizarre highlight. She thought it was funny, she thought it was crazy, and maybe, maybe I'm more tolerant of it because I used to get random nosebleeds when I was a kid, so I don't know. And there's one more scene I just have to mention, the Box Hill sequence. My mom and I confessed to each other just before it that we were anticipating/dreading this scene and curious to see how it would play out this time. And it was awful. I think this might be the worst one yet. Everybody's out of sorts for one reason or another, and Frank's being a callous jerk, and then Emma says the thing to Miss Bates. Ugh. It's especially bad because Emma herself instantly recognizes how cruel it was. There's no little pause where she's like, wait, did I say something I shouldn't have? And Miss Bates's reaction is truly heartbreaking, leaving no doubt that she also immediately understood the comment. I almost wanted to cry with her. I couldn't stand it, and it just goes on. Miranda Hart really surprised me. She's a comedian, so I expected her Miss Bates to be farcical and exaggerated to the hilt, but I think she actually underplayed the comic moments to strike a healthy balance of silly and pitiable. That in turn makes Emma's rudeness even more unconscionable. Anya Taylor-Joy has to work extra hard then to show Emma's contrition and redemption, and I think she succeeds. There are points in the first half when I think, wow, she really is insufferable, but I don't feel that way by the end. She's completed her arc, for the most part. She might have a ways to go, but she's on the right path, and that's good enough for me. I definitely feel I made the right choice in choosing to just go ahead and watch the movie. I was familiar enough with the story to anticipate things and notice changes and recognize lines, but it wasn't too familiar, and when a particular moment would come up, it was like, oh yeah, this part. Does it include everything from the book? No. Does it replicate the things I've loved in other adaptations? Not really, but that's okay. The power of nostalgia is strong, and there are things about my longtime favorite version of Emma that I'll always love and that I'll always picture first. And I know that's the case with other people. Might not be the same version, but that's how we are. But I know that the version I've always loved is not perfect, and there are things I don't like about it. And some of those things are handled better here. So I really enjoyed this movie. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it, and my mom had a really good time with it, and you know what? We watched it once, and then a few weeks later, we watched it again. And though certain scenes had lost the element of surprise, I think we enjoyed it just as much the second time. I can't say that it's for everyone, but if you go into it with the right mindset, I think you can have a lot of fun with it. We did. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you've seen this movie, I am curious to hear what you thought of it, so please go ahead and share your reaction in the comments below. I look forward to reading what you have to say, and I appreciate your taking the time. Thanks for watching.